sponsored webinar. I want to thank American Express GBT for the partnership this morning, and I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting topic that we will discover today, because it's clear that since the pandemic hit and that we start thinking about the return to travel, that sustainability is very high on the agenda. But before we start the presentation, I just want to give a few housekeeping notes. First of all, we will record this session so it becomes available for our members that are not able to join us this morning. And secondly, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat function. We will be more than happy to handle them at the end of the presentation. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Vincent Bourbonnais, who will give us a presentation around sustainability and business travel. Vincent, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pascal, and good morning, all. So let me introduce myself so that you will have a better understanding on the presentation today. I have the chance to lead the product owners of the NEO product and the travel area. So my teams are leading all the different travel services. And today, the idea of the presentation is really to talk about sustainability in the business travel context. But behind the scene, what we would like to present today is how the product organization, a technology organization, how GBT Neo are thinking sustainability from the first questions to the real delivery and the features available in the different tools. So how do we want to manage this? The first thing is really to give you a bit of context on the sustainability from a high-level perspective to business travel and travel perspective in general. And it will be a good introduction to explain the vision we have at GBT and Neo teams. And at the end, you will see how the studies and how the context is, let's say, visible in the tools with real solutions and features. Of course, for the different questions, like Pascal said, please ask it in the chat. I will be happy to answer at the end of the webinar. So how does this industry deal with sustainability? Let's start with some basics observations, but it is very interesting to have a bit of history here. Sustainability and ecology in general is a point that exists since several years now, and that was already a topic we wanted to tackle 4 or 5 or 6 years ago. But it was only a topic behind the scene. We wanted and we have seen interest on this. And since some years now, we see that we have new players, new person in the world where we have an important topic when we talk about sustainability. So I have the nice picture of Greta, where finally we see that in the Nordic region there is a new trend, which is the fixed time, where we should not fly anymore. So we see that there is a lot of noise on this, and we have to balance it and see how we can play with that. The context is also showing that with COVID-19, several things are moving, and we see that we need to advance. So, for example, the different aircraft with Airbus, they want to invest a lot in the hydrogen and the zero emissions. And we also see that there is more and more context and importance on the from home work. So it is just an history saying it was important and it became more important with the COVID-19. And with that statement, from a product organization and technology organization, we wanted to understand what the sustainability means and why is important and how we could support the different clients, but also the travelers with our tool today. So just a context, so what do sustainability and CO2 emission mean? So that's very interesting because sustainability means a lot of things. And when we talk about sustainability, we could talk about ethic, and by at the end of the day, it is how you integrate it in your daily business. But at the end of the day, when we did the different studies, we realized that the majority of our travelers were talking about CO2 emission when we talk about sustainability in business travel. But that was only questionnaires and studies. But if we study it deeper, we will see that talking about sustainability in the business travel is not only related to CO2 emission, and it is more related to ecology in general. And we need to see how it will be represented in the different services and in the daily business for the business travel. So how do we want to answer the question today? So you can see that it was high level, and now we will go service per service, starting by the main important one, so the air transport. So what does it mean? And the first question is, what a gram of CO2 represents? And the reality is, you can say to a traveler that if you fly from Paris to Bali, it will be a kind of a year of emission of CO2 for a French person. The reality is nobody is really aware about a ton of CO2 or a gram of CO2. So the idea we had was really to understand what does it mean. And in the different studies, and that's what you can see on the screen today, we really wanted to see that if you do a return flight, it means that in your full year as a French person, it will be the entire consumption of your CO2. Or if you compare it with the trees, it is around 10 years of absorption by 11 trees. So when you put a number in front of your real life, it becomes very interesting. And that's a point that we need to bear in mind for the next slides. We really want to help travelers to understand what a gram of CO2 means. Some other interesting things when we talk about sustainability in air transport, first thing is, no doubt, the flight is where we consume the most CO2 in the world. So you have numbers in front of you. If you compare it with the train, you have a big discrepancy. What is interesting also is, even if we don't have a clear knowledge on the market on what is a gram of CO2 for the different travelers, we see that there is a real interest to understand and to know the impact of a business trip for the traveler. And the last important thing, to give the context, is related to Paris agreements, where there is a call to reduce from 33% the CO2 emission by 2030. And all the different statistics I wanted to present to you today will be a key element for the next step, and how do we want to answer the trends in the business travel and the technology. Second point, when we talk about CO2 and air transport in general, is a part of the meaning. What is a gram? How do we calculate a gram of CO2? And how does it work depending on your government and in your region? And that's why it is very interesting, because we need to answer to a question where finally we have different ways to set a value when we talk about CO2 emission. Let's say if we keep it standard, we have different organisms depending on your country where you can have an estimation of the CO2 emission. The basic calculation is you take the trip distance and then you multiply it per table with the average of CO2 emission per passenger over this distance. So how does it work? You have the four main, let's say, provider, where you have EPA for the NORAM region, ICAO, which is the IATA norm organization, where several airlines are using it, ADEM, which is used mainly in France, and DEFRA, led by the UK government, but where several companies are using it to calculate the CO2 emission. All of them will calculate the consumption in the same way. So the same kind of method, distance plus a table where you have an average. What is interesting is depending on the organization, the value at the end could be different. And going deeper in each organization, if you take a CRO, for example, it will be a bit granular because you would have the chance to evaluate the CO2 thanks to the aircraft type. And therefore, for example, is taking, in addition, the cabin class. But if you compare it to ADMA or EPA, it is very basic where we don't have aircraft or cabin. However, we think that as a business travel agency and technology, we should provide the different calculation method for our clients, because depending on your country, you may have a specific requirement to follow. But that's very interesting because even if you only have 4 or 5 different calculation methods, it stays, let's say, framed. And that's a transition to hotels, and where we wanted to talk about CO2 in the different services, like I said in the introduction. And for hotels, we are clearly in a different way when we talk about sustainability. Same statistics, we see that we have a clear interest from the travelers to know the impact. They are keen to maybe sometimes pay a bit more to have a trip, let's say, more ecological. But a part of the statistics you see here, which I think are quite interesting to see the importance of the sustainability for hotels, we wanted to compare and to see how we can answer sustainable topics for hotels. And that's where it is completely different from air transport, for example. I say that for air transport, we are talking about CO2 emission. We have 4 main calculation methods. When we talk about ecology for hotels, it becomes very difficult to provide a clear answer. So talking about CO2 emission, you can, and for example, DEFRA is offering a value, but it is very high level. You can have a luxury hotel or a basic hotel, you would have the same consumption of CO2 as soon as it is a night in London, for example. But apart of that, apart of the CO2 emission, what is interesting is to see how an hotel can have a label and what is the meaning. And the answer is, when we talk about hotels, we are not talking about CO2 emission. The main topic is the criteria and the way the hotel is green. Talking about the rubbish, talking about the way they clean the room, etc., etc. And you have dozens of labels on the industry. It could be fair trade, it could be green key, green earth, EU eco label. And the fact is, you cannot really compare an hotel A plus an hotel B because they don't have the same label. So that's very interesting for the next slide again, just to see that we have something ongoing for the hotel, but it is not framed at all. And we cannot really talk about CO2 emission with the values and the tools we have when we talk about hotels, but maybe there is a door opened with the different levels. But how do we want to play with that and to help our clients and the travelers to understand the sustainability? The last pillar of the study was around car rental. So you understand that what we wanted to do is to say global and service per service. And the last one where we can work on is the car rental. And here we can talk about CO2 emission, and from a value perspective, it is clearly a mix between, it is in the middle between the rail and between the air. It is in the middle. The fact is, what does it mean when we talk about car rental? The main topic is the kind of vehicle you will use. Is it an hybrid one, electric one, or not? And the reality is the trend is showing that clearly we should continue to invest in electric. So again, for you on the call, it could be a basic point, but when you check statistics, it is crazy to see the speed of it. In 2019, if you don't talk about the business travel in general, we have seen a growth of 80% of electric car sales, which is a lot. When we talk about providers and if we focus on business travelers, we see a clear trend. From a ground transport perspective, for example, if we compare it to Uber, there is new players in the market focusing 100% on electric vehicles. And same for car rental provider, where we see that there is more and more communication from the key players on the market, like a Europcar, Sixt, and all of there, to promote and to push electric cars in the business travel. That said, I was talking about the different government having a good power or pressure on the clients. The government is really pushy, and if you buy electric cars, of course, you will have bonus and you will have less taxes. So that's basically the sustainability when we talk about car rental. At a conclusion, for the study and the context itself, it is more than a trend. Today, we have to answer on the sustainable topics. We need to be pragmatic. And the fact is today, it is not really mature. The market is not mature enough. Because depending on the country, depending on the service you have different ways to answer sustainability. But why it is interesting? Because as key player on the business travel, we have different ways to support our clients and our travelers. So how do we want to answer this? So the NEO approach and what is the vision for the product team? That's very simple. So that's a baseline, but develop eco-friendly features, travel with responsibility. What is important for us is not to say, let's say, to invest massively if it is not used, but to invest in the way we may have an impact. So we want to help travelers to understand what sustainability means depending on the service they book. That's why you have the study at the beginning talking about air transport, hotel, or car rental. And we also want to support our clients in the way where basically we have Paris agreements, we have pressure for the different governments to reduce CO2 emissions. So our vision is be pragmatic, invest in the best area where you can help users to understand what is sustainability and help clients to reduce at the end and let's say report to the different governments. I think you have no clear view of, let's say, the summary of the sustainability. Of course, we could talk about during hours about sustainability, but the question is now, having this context in mind, how do we want to answer this from a technology perspective? And the way we do it is, like I said, module per module and persona per persona. So what we name persona is a traveler or a travel manager. So first thing is, we as GBT Neo, we are not advising which calculation method you should use. We can, of course, orient you, help you, but as a tool, our vision is you may have a requirement if you are in UK, or you may have a requirement if you are in France, for example. So we should offer to our companies, to our clients, the different calculation method. If you need support, we will, of course, help you to understand what are the differences between each one. But the idea of Neo is really to provide the different calculation method in the tool. We also offer some content management, so very simple, but you can say, here, I'm a company and I want to promote CO2 and sustainability in my tool, so I can put messages here. Of course, we want to focus, because that's where we consume the most CO2 today, on the transport. So what we really want to do is to display the CO2 to the traveler, but also have the possibility to play with a filter and say, I don't want to see this or this. What is interesting is by playing with the filter, you can compare the rail and the transport. And as a client, you can define if you want to promote trail or flight in the same page. Other way to answer it, and I think that's a key element if you bear in mind what I was presented regarding hotels. So that's where we really want to find a way to help clients to answer sustainability on hotels. Like we said, we have dozens of providers for the labels. So as Neo and like for the calculation method, we don't want to say we only want to use green key. We only want to use eco label, for example. So what has been done is to allow our clients, like they do a program hotel with a preferred program, to flag the hotel they consider as eco-friendly, because our client A will be more, let's say, keen to use eco label. Our client B will be keen to use green key. And at the end of the day, the hotels are different. So today, as a client, you can push eco-friendly hotel in the display. You can even have a filter at the top for the travelers to really present it and push the great hotel program you may have with your partners. We also offer different reporting solution between GBT or Neo. And like I say, the idea is to have a 360 approach. We also promote and push in the display electric and hybrid cars in Neo. So that's how we wanted to answer the study that has been done in the context. The reality today is, even for the car, for example, and like I said, the market is and the industry is not mature enough. But at least if you want to find it, if you're a traveler, you will have the chance, thanks to a filter, to book an electric car and to see it in the user interface. Even if all providers are not ready yet, we offer different solutions, and we really want to invest and help the industry in that direction. That's not the only thing we are doing. So what you have seen is what we do today. But more generally, what we want to do is to continue to integrate new methods. So I was talking about ICAO, where we have a granular approach where we can integrate aircraft. We also have, and we are investing in a carbon offset solution, a joint solution between Neo and GBT, where other clients, you can subscribe, let's say, to the solution GBT is offering to say all your flights will be offset. And in Neo, what we want to do is to display to the end user. So by taking this flight, your consumption is X gram of CO2. Bear in mind that your company is paying X euros to offset the carbon emission. Next steps we are thinking about is also to improve our travel policy. What is important is to say today it is basic display, we have the traveler, but we think that clients will really invest in the coming years in the travel policy. So today, and from an history perspective, let's say what is important is the comfort or the price. So we can say, I want to promote non-stop flight and the cheapest flights in your travel policy. But in the future, we can say, I want to promote the greenest trips and the greenest flights. And it will be the greenest one, which will be in policy, and all other flights will be out of policy. So that's where we want to study and to invest. And what we want to do, waiting that, is also to flag for the travelers what is the greenest option. Just small information saying that this flight is the greenest one. It means we maybe not recommend it, we just inform you that this one is consuming the less of CO2. Last slide for today, and I think we are quite good in the timing. That's not the only thing we are following. So the previous slide is something where we are currently investing and where we are developing it today. But we are also following different things. We want to increase and to improve the way we do the eco-friendly things for hotel by, for example, promoting a rate that is already offset. We are also thinking, we are following this and see the trends. For example, as a traveler, you will receive each month an individual carbon footprint rate. Why not? That's something we could check in the future. Continue to invest in travel policies. So I was saying that I want to recommend, for example, electric or the greenest, but who knows? We can say there is a program saying you are a traveler if you consume more than 10 tons, you will be blocked to book tomorrow. I don't know. Again, it is just things we are following. Different reports per traveler, for example. And of course, you may know that one of the key things of Neo is the door-to-door. So what we could name the trip planner. And we could have options in the future using our technology to say, from my point A to my point B, I want to select the greenest option and I will only find green options for this. So that's all the different trends where we are following. I'm sure it will become more and more important. It is already important, like I said, and we need to be ready for this. Yesterday, again, I was reading the news and I have seen that more and more rail providers are investing in electric and full electric or hydrogen type of aircraft or rail. So I think we really have to follow this and to continue to invest. And that's how other product and business travel agency we want to work on. And that's the end of the webinar for me.
Thank you very much, Vincent. We did receive a few questions. So the first question we received is, as a company, we report CO2 emissions, and it is also what we do for air rail rental cars. This can also be done for hotels, but you say now that this is not the way we should measure. In what way should we measure hotels if not CO2 emissions?
The fact is, other clients, I know that you have to measure CO2 emission, and because the government sometimes is asking it, you have to do reports. I'm just providing a point of view. The fact is, if I was talking about G4, for example, where I know there is a base of calcul, my personal feeling is it is not the best way to do it, like I said, because in London, for example, you book luxury hotel and you book a basic one, you will have the same CO2 emission. However, at the end of the trip, it won't be the case. If you spend a night in the luxury one, you will consume more, of course. The fact is you have to present stats today, so that's good to use DIFRA. But my vision and our vision is, the reality is you should check the labels first, because that's with the label that you will have a real impact at the end. The luxury hotel could be very CO2, it could consume a lot of CO2, and the basic one could be an eco label. And you can really have an impact at the end rather than a basic number. So that's how I wanted to explain it. Does it answer to the question? Yeah.
I think it certainly gives some insight to the question, so that's great. Thank you very much for that. I just want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, feel free to submit them in the chat. We will be more than happy to handle those. And I do have a follow-up question that we received. I have part of my hotel program rated eco hotels today, and I measure with CO2 per kilo per night. And I would like to have this figure added to the hotel under the rate. Is this possible, or can this be developed?
Yes, today it is possible. So if I get well the question. So like I said, you can say the hotel A is an eco-friendly one because you are following a label or dedicated criteria. And you may also say that other clients, I have negotiated offset rates with this hotel. So if my travelers is booking this rate, so my negotiated one, um, the rate will be offset automatically. With Neo, for example, you can name your rates depending on the code of and the negotiation you have. And in the display, you could say this rate is an offsetted one. So client A offset carbon. So that's something you can present and display in the tool.
Thank you very much. I have not seen any other questions coming in. So we'll just give it, let's say 30 seconds to see if any other questions would pop up. If you have any, please feel free to submit them in the chat. Oh, and we do have one that comes in. So these different calculation methods made it hard for us as a travel agent to compensate the CO2, etc. Client X wants to compensate his emissions based on our data. Amadeus CAO is used for the calculation. Our partner who we work with for compensating uses another formula to calculate the emissions and the compensation. How can we automate this workflow and to avoid any manual action needed?
That's very difficult, and the question is good because, like I said, you have the different calculation methods. So what is important is for the client itself, so our common client, to define which calculation methods he wants. And that's only when we have it that we can provide the real offset, but only when the trip is done. And even today, so that's my vision. If we want to compensate and to do it properly, the best way to do it is to do it after the flights and with reports, because you will have the real value and you will have the one that the customer, the client, is asking. Like you say, Amadeus is providing ICAO. However, maybe the customer wants to use DIFRA as a base. So the best way to do it is to do the report after that and check the flights used and calculate with DIFRA. That will be a recommendation, but there is no real automation from what I know. So it will be semi-automated at the end.
Thank you. And we did receive another one. Does the program tool take into account the type of airplane that is used, or is it only taking averages?
So it depends again on the calculation method. So today in NEO, we have EPA, ADMA, and DEFRA, and it is only an average, but in the average, the aircraft type are taken. So just to give you an example of DEFRAs, I will say from 0 to 3,700 kilometers, the average is X, depending on the cabin. So in DEFRA, you have the cabin. And this average is calculated based on the kind of aircraft flying from this duration. I have to admit that even if the aircraft is taken in the average at the beginning, the best and the calculation method, and that's where we want to invest, is ICAO, where at the booking time, we take the aircraft type, and with the aircraft type, you will have it taken into consideration in the calculation. So I think you have the answer. 3 are taking it in the average. 1 is really taking it at the booking time, depending on the flight you select.
Thank you. And there's another one that came in. So we are very popular this morning with questions, which is a great thing. Thank you very much for all the questions submitted. So by developing NEO with new CO2 sustainability features, will this also mirror in the CO2 emissions report from GBT?
Yeah, so we work together. We have a common team between GBT and NEO, where we are aligned on the values we have. So let's say if you want to display different CO2 in NEO, GBT Insight tool will also have DIFRA, same for ADMA, for example, and the values are the same. So that's how we want to do it, and we have let's say frequent call together to be aligned and to work on it. So same for the CO2 offset. where basically the CO2 offset is a joint feature with NEON GBT.
Thank you very much, Vincent. I think that was the last question we received. So I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I want to thank American Express GBT for the partnership this morning. Thank you everybody for joining. Just know that our next webinar is coming Thursday morning. If you need more information, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to provide the details. In the meantime, I want to wish everybody a happy rest of the day. Stay healthy and talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.